Today, we're going to talk about the Islamic philosophy, its definition, its brief history, its philosophical foundations, its well known philosophers, and its role to education, its principles, its aims, its process, the curriculum, the methods of teaching, the role of teacher, and lastly, the educational implications of Islamic philosophy in education. Now let's define the Islamic philosophy. Islamic philosophy is a systematic investigation of problems connected with life, the universe, ethics, society, and so on, as conducted in the Muslim world. So this is not just in Syria or in Turkey, but it is a complex intellectual process in which Syrians, Arabs, Persians, Turks, Berbers, and others took an active part. Now let's move on to its brief history. The early Islamic philosophy refers to the philosophy during the Islamic Golden Age and is dated between 8th and 12th centuries. It is well known for having kalam and falsafa. The Islamic Golden Age is traditionally understood to have begun during the reign of the Abbasid Caliph Harun al-Rashid in 786 to 809. This started with the inauguration of the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, where scholars from various parts of the world with different cultural backgrounds were mandated to gather and translate all the world's classical knowledge into Arabic. So it is said to have ended with the collapse of the Abbasid Caliphate with the Mongol invasion and the sack of Baghdad in 1258. During the Islamic Golden Age, the Arab-speaking world was ruled by various caliphates, experiencing a scientific, economic, and cultural flourishing. Now, under the Islamic Golden Age, Kalam and Falsafa are the two well-known philosophies that emerge. For Kalam, it is the philosophy that seeks Islamic theological principles through dialectic or through debates. They talk about what they think, they talk about knowledge and a lot of things. In Arabic, the word literary means speech. That's why principles are talked about and are processed through discourse. In later times, kalam was used to mean simply theology. Now, falsafa is another philosophy during the Islamic Golden Age, and it is a Greek loan word meaning philosophy, and it founded on interpretations of Aristotelianism and Neo-Platonism. The ancient Greek philosophy was introduced among the Arabs, and the peripatetic school began to find able representatives, and among them were Al-Kindi, Al-Farabi, Ibn Sina, and Ibn Rushd. And these philosophers will be discussed later on in the discussion because these able representatives from Falsafa, under the philosophy of Falsafa, are the most well-known philosophers of Islamic philosophy, and they have contributed a lot of things in education and the other fields and aspects. Now we are getting on the end of the classical period or the early Islamic philosophy. Al-Ghazali, whose work Tahafut al-Falasifa, or the incoherence of the philosophers, effectively demolished the main arguments of the peripatetic schools and ended Kalam and Falsafa. So this work of Al-Ghazali is the reason why there is a need for the transformation of the concepts that was introduced during the early Islamic philosophy, because the representatives during those times cannot argue with what Al-Ghazali was talking about with his work that is related to the incoherence and the incompetence of the philosophers who cannot answer his questions or his criticisms against their beliefs. Now, the time for modern Islamic philosophy arrived, and it is a time when it revived some of the trends of the medieval Islamic philosophy, but it has to transform and to focus more on the duties of Muslims and the role of Islam in sociology of knowledge and in forming ethical codes, the laws, the Islam laws, and the legal codes, the fiqh or the jurisprudence and the rules of jihad, everything about war. And this modern Islamic philosophy continues up to now, to the present times. Though it did not fully demolish the traditional Islamic philosophy, it revives or it tried to change more because they were able to see the criticisms before, and so they learned from those criticisms and they try to transform into a better philosophical perspective. Now let's move on to the philosophical foundations of Islamic philosophy. Firstly, in relation to ontology, the Islamic ontology or metaphysics, God at the first level of the hierarchies that the mystics refer to as the oneness. So according to Madkour, among others, in terms of ontology in Islam, God is the beginning and the end. Okay, the existence of everything originated from God. Then the divine truth, in all forms and shapes of existence, tangible or rational, it flows through the lowest of them, and once again, these flows returns to the divine truth that the process has been originated from. So the world is the manifestation of God. It is formed by divine plan, His will and His management. Now, in Islamic viewpoint, the world is divided into two parts. We have the tangible and intangible things, which is the shahada and the ghaib, respectively. But the tangible manifestation of God are not held as independent beings. In this case, it is technically and analytically prevalent in science and arts, but they are taken as signs of God's knowledge and power. So it's not the being alone. It is always the manifestation and the product of God. So the whole process is the path to get to know Him. While the other one, the intangible, this one consists of the spiritual beings, because Muslim society and the Islamic philosophy believes in the presence of the souls, the angels, and the jinn. And accordingly, Quran has discussed the intangible world, but it has not talked about the quality of soul in the creatures of the upper world. So it is believed that in Islamic philosophy, we have to limit ourselves to the borders of Quranic politeness and perspective. We have to learn what is addressed in Quran, and we should not let our minds wander in what is not addressed. Now, as for the human nature, which is also part of metaphysics, this approach maintains that the image of human in Islam is essentially different from the one that philosophers represent. So, for instance, it is believed that while nature or physic, including human nature, in Greek concerns the material things, in Islam the meaning of human nature, considering its literal root to bring about an effect, has the connotation that human is the creature of God. The effect of God in human is called fitra. Now, for Madcore, the main characteristics of humans in Islamic view are as follows. First, humans have a divine nature. Second, there's a binary composition, which is the soul and the body. And third, an equal potentially for good and evil. So there is a tendency to be good and also to be evil or bad. And also, there is a free choice and responsibility. Means say there is freedom, but with freedom there comes responsibility. You have to do things in accordance to the law to achieve true freedom. Now, secondly, let's talk about um in terms of knowledge. So, relying on Ghazali and Madkur, they believe that what is meant by knowledge in religious terminology is to know God. So, true knowledge is to know God. This knowledge includes the sciences of nature and history only when they are based on the divine foundation. So, for Islamic philosophy, you will only know God if you know the universe, if you know the world, if you can understand and explain them. Thus, one can say that the sources of knowledge are religion and reason. Just like for the thought of scholasticism, they try to involve reasoning together with religion. While the primacy is for the former, religion determines the boundaries of rationality. Now, Madcore illustrates the relation between religion and rationality as well. So, there is a connection between religion and rationality. Number one, true rational knowledge can be in conflict with a true religious knowledge. So, meaning to say, there must always be a harmony between rational knowledge and true religious knowledge. Second, the rational knowledge which is in conflict with religion is no doubt wrong, and human reason can show this. So, if the rational knowledge does not go with religion, then it's wrong. See, because the people or the perspective of Islamic philosophy is that you have to do things to push yourself in knowing Allah. And if the things that you do are not in accordance to what Allah tells you, then it is wrong. Then third, a true rational knowledge should not be taken as a knowledge outside religion. Meaning to say, a true rational knowledge is both rational, since reason realizes its rightness, and religious, since it states what religion claims. So, it clearly states that there is really a connection between rationality and religion. Now, let's with regards to the essential or instrumental value of knowledge. Islam is a mere subjective knowledge that does not influence the human life and behavior is worthless. So, if you cannot use and if you cannot influence other people with the use of the Islamic philosophy and perspective, then it is worthless. It is nonsense. Because the ultimate goal of knowledge is the fertility of earth and improvement of human life according to the way of the religion. And in dividing the sciences based on Islam, There are two categories. First, the sciences related to human beings. This includes the ideas, the history, the interpretations, and of course, politics. While the other one, the pure sciences, it involves physics, chemistry, and biology. So, see, the knowledge should be the application of these things through the sciences. Now, he maintains that the former should be acquired by religion, and one should not rely and use non Muslims' findings in that era. So, for them to be able to obtain true knowledge, when it comes to ideas, histories, interpretations, and politics, it should always be in the Muslim perspective or in the Muslim worldview. Because if they're going to look at the others, they will be confused and they will have a different interpretation of the things that should be learned in the Islamic philosophical view. But they can they will be allowed to use other perspectives if they are going to educate themselves with the pure sciences such as physics, chemistry, and those things. Now, values, let's go with the values. Values are absolute, it is fixed, and it is stable in Islamic viewpoint. Therefore, moral values should be maintained in human society, be it primal or civilized, underdeveloped or industrialized. Because it is believed that the source of values is Islamic Sharia, and it's not a social agreement. And since the source is definite, then the Islamic values are fixed too. Just for example, just like what they do. The women cannot leave their houses without their husband's permissions, and girls cannot even marry without their father's permission because that's what they used to be before. And values are fixed. They cannot change that. That's why they always have to think about their actions and their decisions because the basis of their actions with regards to values are absolute. Now, these are the philosophical foundations in terms of metaphysics and epistemology and values in Islamic philosophy. Let's move on to the Islamic philosophers. Um, a while ago, I talked about the well-known philosophers during the falsafa. Now let's talk about them. The first one is Al-Farabi. So Al-Farabi is also known as Al-Mualim Al-Thani, and he is the second teacher. He came after Aristotle and is considered as one of the greatest philosophers of the world. Now, his most important book on political philosophy is called The Views of the People of the Virtuous City. And in his Virtuous City, Al-Farabi seeks to establish a city based on justice, just like Plato's Republic, and it seeks the ultimate happiness of its citizens and is guided by the enlightened views of its philosophers. Now, reading Al-Farabi is illuminating, and he does not only make you think about politics, about justice, but also Al-Farabi makes you think about thinking itself. That's why he's considered one of the greatest philosophers of the world. Now, second, we have Al-Ghazali. Now, Al-Ghazali is one of the most important scholars of Islamic thought. He is a philosopher, a legal scholar, and a theologian. And toward the end of his life, he is considered as a mystical thinker in the class of Ibn Arabi, which I will be discussing later. So, for many Muslims, Al-Ghazali is a paragon of the Muhaddi. He is the reviver of Islam. Coming at a time when there were many disputations between philosophers and theologians, um, between the rationalists and traditionalists, he tried to bridge these divisions. Just like what I've said a while ago, there was Kalam, which is the theologians, and then we also have the Falsam for the philosophers. Now, his Iyam Ulum al-Din, the revival of religious sciences, talks about the endeavor to find the golden mean between all these diverging trends. And he discusses his intellectual and spiritual doubts and his quest for truth. And his books talks about liberal arts and education in itself. The third one is Ibn Rushd. He was a remarkable thinker. He's a judge, as he is an expert in Islamic law or Maliki, and he's also a physician. Now, he is known as Averroes in the West, and his contribution was more on the Western religion and philosophy rather than on Islamic thought. But he is a remarkable thinker, and he is considered as one of the best. One of his works, The Decisive Treatise, he talks about the case for philosophy and for the compatibility of science and religion. So, just like Al-Ghazali, he creates a bridge between two things. Now, for Ibn Rushd, it is science and religion. Also, faith and reason in the form or in the view of scholasticism. So, the two classics of Ibn Rushd are the Incoherence of Incoherence. This is the answer of Rushdie to Al-Ghazali's Incoherence of Philosophy. Remember the thing that I talked about, the reason for ending the traditional Islamic philosophy was because of the work of Al-Ghazali's Incoherence of Philosophy. Now, Ibn Rushd is the one who rebutted that work, and he provided a strong defense of Aristotelian philosophy. That's why he is considered as one of the best. Now, the last one is Ibn Arabi. So, some say that he is perhaps the most unique and the most perplexing and at the same time most profound Muslim philosophical thinker. Because he was not ordinary. He was mystical, speculative, and indescribable. So, he was the first postmodern feminist thinker in human intellectual heritage. So, some of his works are the Vessels of Wisdom and the Meccan Openings. Now, some say that before you can actually understand his works, you have to understand him so that you will be able to appreciate his Islamic intellectual heritage or his Islamic intellectual contributions to Islamic philosophy. Now we're done with a brief history and the philosophers and its philosophical foundations. We are now moving on to the Islamic philosophy in education. So, according to Ashraf, 1979, he defines education as a process involving three rewards. So he says that it would contribute to the individual, to the society or the community to which he or she belongs, and the whole content of reality, both material and spiritual, which plays a dominant role in determining the nature and destiny of man and society. Therefore, education plays a very important role and is a pillar of the national development in many societies. Now we're going to talk about the principles of Islamic philosophy and education. First, Islamic education is part of the process of knowing Allah. Remember that everything in education comes down only to Allah. And so the whole process of Islamic education is to get to know Allah. Second, Islamic education is trying to form a whole person. Now, this will be fully discussed on the aims also, because it is said there that in Islamic education, it's not just about the mental or the cognitive or the spiritual or the physical alone, but it is everything. In all aspects, it must be balanced. It must be improved for a better purpose. And third, Islamic education is always associated with religion. As I have said a while ago, everything that they do must be with accordance to their religion. Their values, their actions, and their decisions in their lives must be accompanied with the religion that they are worshipping, which is Islam, of course. So, Islamic education is primarily viewed as divinely revealed, and it prepares individuals to be upright citizens on earth so that they will be able to attain happiness in the life after death, because education for Islam is not just about the present, but most importantly, the life hereafter. So everything that I've said about the principles of Islamic philosophy indicates that God is the center and the focus of Islamic education. Hence, to be educated, a Muslim means to be devoted in attaining the pleasure of God. So, this should result in pious actions that would enable the Muslim to draw closer to God. Their actions must be for God and for His happiness. And the only way to achieve this is according to the divine revelation. We have to follow the example of the Prophet. And one condition that this can be achieved is through knowledge. Remember, I said a while ago that true knowledge is to know God. And with knowledge, you are one step closer to God. That's why education for Muslim communities rather, is the most important thing for them. It is their priority. Because the aim of education relayed by most Islamic educationalists can be no other than a religious aim. Now let's move on to the aims. The aims of education in Islam is stipulated in the First World Conference on Muslim Education held in Jeddah, Mecca. That was way 1393 to 1977 AD. The whole, if you are going to summarize the aims of education, it is to produce a good man. Because we see the balanced growth of total personality of man, then it should cater for the growth of man in all aspects. Meaning to say, this involves the intellectual, the spiritual, the physical, everything. And all this should motivate the person towards goodness. And if we're going to obtain all this, we will attain perfection. And those are the aims of education Islam. So for us to be able to achieve this, we have to train the man's spirit, his intellect, his rational self, even his feelings and bodily senses. So what is being suggested here is the complete submission in all aspects of a Muslim, be it spiritual, intellectual, rational, physical, etc., in order to develop into a complete personality resulting in becoming a slave to the Almighty. So the bottom line is that the ultimate aim of Muslim education lies in the realization of complete submission. Again, it's the complete submission to Allah. Everything that we do, it is for Allah. Everything that we say, everything that we learn, it's for Him, and it goes to Him. On the level of the individual, the community, and humanity at large. So this paradigm can also be witnessed in the Quran, because the Quran talked about this many times, and also through the sayings of the Prophet, where a believing person is referred to as a slave. So that's how the Islam philosophy looks at the believers. They are the slaves of God because they have to do everything according to Him and only to Him. Now, what does it mean to have the education? What is the process? In Islam, seeking out knowledge is part of the process of education, which aims to enlighten the human soul and enriches the treasures of knowledge that helps in knowing Allah, the creator of all humankind and universe. So as I've said, with the aims of Islamic education, there should be a balanced growth of total personality of man. So it involves all aspects, not just the soul, not just the human brain or the knowledge, but both. And there should be balance. And these two must be for Allah and no one else. So the education in Islam is twofold. First, acquiring intellectual knowledge through the application of reason and logic, of course, and developing spiritual knowledge. According to the worldview of Islam, provision in education must be made equally for both. So, again, there should be balance. And acquiring knowledge in Islam is not intended as an end, but as a means to stimulate a more elevated moral and spiritual consciousness that leads to faith and righteous action. So it does not end. Learning does not end, because it is not an end, but it is a mean to go and to learn about God, about their God. And this helps them do the righteous actions, the righteous decisions in life until they reach the level of perfection. So this educative process will instill the sense of responsibility to worship the Creator and at the same time obey His commands at all times, as well as to accomplish the purpose of the creation of mankind as written in Quran, which is to worship Allah. And it has gone through four distinct periods in Islamic history. The first period is the period of development, which started with the resurgence of the Prophet Muhammad. So, the main characteristics of the first period is it's purely Arabic, and it's more on Islamic religion and spreading of its teaching, because it's trying to develop the philosophy, and it's based on religious sciences and of course Arabic grammar. Now, there is already an initial study of foreign languages during the first period, and the mosques are the center of activities of grammar and literature, and everything that's related to education is done in mosques. So this period was followed by the second period, which is the flourishing period of education that started in the East. And this in this time, the western part of Islamic Empire has its center on Andalusia. Now, during this period, the curriculum was expanded to include non-religious sciences, because at the very first period, it was all about knowing Islam and spreading its teachings. But with the second period, they tried to include non-religious sciences. Then it was followed by a third period, which is the period of weaknesses and decadence, started in the East also in North Africa. This was during the resurgence of Ottoman Empire, and it lasted until the independence of Muslim countries. So during this time, the entire curriculum was based on the transmitted knowledge, and there was a decline in Arabic language. Now, the method of instruction was based on rote learning or memorization, and there was a deterioration of scientific research and thinking process, because teachers only serve as knowledge providers or information providers. That's why students are not able to process things or to use their critical thinking, which also resulted in the use of summarization and repetition. Now, the last period is known as the period of revival. It is the awakening and rebuilding of education in Muslim countries, which started when the Muslim countries were relieved of the empires that took over them. Now, this process is still going on up to the present time. And the most important characteristic of religious education during this period is the adoption of Western educational system, the inclusion of the sciences like what we have now, and the penetration of Western culture, of course, and the attempt of eliminating dualism between modern and religious education. Now, Islamic philosophy believed that the function of Islamic education should endeavor to teach and help students acquire different aspects of knowledge. Within, there is a reminder, it should be within the parameters of Islam through the use of well-designed curriculum. Therefore, it is clear that in order to develop the Islamic system and society, an educational system and its curriculum must be planned according to Islamic worldview. Now, looking at the curriculum, we have the Quran. Though the Quran and knowledge derived from it, such as its recitation, interpretation, while the other one, the Sunnah, it is the life of the Holy Prophet, the history and the message of the prophets before him, and its authoritative transmission. Now, we also have the laws of Islam, the Sharia, or the jurisprudence and law, the principles and practice of Islam. We also have the in religion, the they all talk about God, His essence, the names and philosophy, including valid cosmological doctrines pertaining to the hierarchy of being. There is also linguistic sciences, Arabic, its grammar, literature, the rational, intellectual, and philosophical sciences. There are also human sciences and natural sciences, applied sciences, a lot of sciences actually. So, Al Ghazali considered acquiring religious sciences as an obligatory education for every Muslim because it is essential for the discharge of an individual's Islamic duties. And he classified both religious and technical sciences into obligatory. Now, um, it is obligatory and at the same time meritorious. So, this classification has been on for many centuries, and it is the cornerstone of the Islamic theory of curriculum development. So, the other sciences, such as the arithmetic, medicine, agriculture, history, science, and linguistics, are considered as praiseworthy. Now, we move on to the methods of teaching. There are a lot of methods of teaching when it comes to Islamic education. Teaching is done gradually from easy to difficult because this is a student centered kind of learning, and teaching involves, or rather, learning involves the interest of the students first. So, from there, from the interest of the students, they create the lessons and they teach the students until they reach the complexity of their interests. Now, they also have the research method. With the research method, they use um, credible and a lot of documents, even the use of literature, um, to explain and to expound their knowledge. Now, there is also a method of discussion wherein the art of questioning is used here, and there is a great interaction between the teacher and the students for them to be able to try to use discourse to tell and explain everything that is on their mind. So, with accordance to research method, they are also using scientific analysis because they have to analyze everything that is given to them even when they are self-studying. They have to learn not to receive everything at once. They have to analyze things first and see to it if it is true or not before they will actually take the information. Now, ethics is a great part of the methods of teaching because it involves learning what is right and what is wrong. Now, memorization and oral recitation is still part of the teaching method in Islamic education for the sayings in Sunnah and the teachings in their Bible, which is Quran. Now, deductive and inductive reasoning goes together with their analysis and their researches, and also the analysis synthesis method, wherein they just don't analyze, they also synthesize and create things out of those ideas, out of those knowledge, out of those learning. Now, two of the most important methods of teaching is the divine intuition and practical application of knowledge. Now, I remember the means of instruction used by teachers was Arabic and Persian. Now, they also use foreign language. So, for the practical application of knowledge, it is important because in Islamic education, what does matter is not the concept, but the practice, methodology, and its objectives. Now, for divine intuition, as I've said, the core reason for education is knowing God. And when deciding or when you are thinking about things, you have to put everything in Him. You have to rely on Him. You have to base everything from Allah. Because everything is for Allah. That's what the aim, the method, and even the curriculum of Islamic education is all about. The role of teachers. Now, according to Ibn Kiteba, teachers are recommended not to use tension or pride. Before, teachers were used to be holy persons, and they are allowed to use the principle of punishment. But then, in the modern times, it is believed that punishment only creates tension and a lot of pressure to the students, which contributes to their inefficient learning. That's why for the Islamic education, teachers must not inflict pain, nor it can be physical or emotional in any way that they can hurt the students. Now, teachers will be able to do this if they care for the students' interest and treat them like the dearest sons with kindness, courtesy, benevolence or kindness, and patience on probable alienation. Because sometimes children have different stages wherein, for example, they won't learn this topic that fast, or they won't be able to understand certain concepts, certain lessons like the others. So we have to be patient, in short, and we have to treat them as our own children. Being a teacher in Islamic education. Now, teachers are able to understand the soul of their students and the characteristics possessed by their students. So, this is in turn of caring genuinely for the students, because generally the ultimate goal of interaction with students is to know the students. And it's not just to know the students, but we have to know them by heart, their interest, their personality, so that we will be able to build rapport and to know them better, so that they will create a good relationship. It will create a good relationship. It will create a stable relationship between the teacher and the student. So, next, we have teachers are the substitutes of fathers. So, generally, the role of teacher is in a form of guidance. They are not just providers of information or knowledge. They are the one who helps the students to create their own personality, to develop their values, and to learn from the things that they have to learn. And for the teachers to be able to do this, they must not be judgmental. And they should have the power and the ability to change students for the better. And lastly, the teachers implement on how physical development and health attributes are important in life. So, as I've said a while ago, it's not just about the intellect or the cognitive aspect, but it includes the physical aspect and the totality in the holistic development and learning of a student. So the teachers are the ones who would teach the students that they have to take care of their body, of their physical attributes, because it helps them obtain other things. As they say, a sound body constitutes a sound mind. So the teachers are the ones who will explain that to the students. Now, finally, of all the things that I've talked about, we have come to the educational implications of Islamic philosophy. First, education is sacred, as it was Allah Himself who educated the first man. And education is a continuous process, meaning to say it does not end knowing one thing, but it must be holistic. Education is not restricted to what went within the school, because education and learning comes even after graduating from school, through the application of the knowledge and learning in their decision making and the paths and the journeys that they will encounter in their lives. And also, gender restrictions in education is not part of Islamic education, because for the Islamic education, everyone must be educated. So it has to be made clear that what makes Islamic education different compared to others is that education in Islam aims to educate human beings with knowledge and positive skills, and also to instill them the good ethical conducts approved by the Sharia, or the law, the Muslim law. Though the Muslim students have to be aware that the acquisition of knowledge is not merely to satisfy an intellectual curiosity or just for material or worldly gains. They need this to produce rational and righteous human beings who are able to meet the spiritual, moral, and physical needs of their families. And together with that, the people and the whole mankind. So this will lead to the ideal personality. And that is the product of education, of Islamic education. And all this is founded on the philosophy and faith in Allah and the commitment to realize God-given moral code. Simultaneously, education in Islam is not merely of acquiring intellectual knowledge, just like what I've said before, but it is a mean of molding the nature and character of individuals so that they can collectively represent Islamic values. So that in the end, they will be able to behave like or as the vicegerents of Allah on earth, to serve as witnesses to truth and noble conducts. Because in Islam, the concept of knowledge enjoyed such a central place in society, unparalleled in other civilizations. It dominates all aspects of Muslim, intellectually, spiritually, and socially, and in all other aspects of life. So that concludes the Islamic philosophy, and its implications to education. Thank you.